Good afternoon, and welcome to the Huxley Speaker Series. My name is Stefan Fralin, the coordinator of the series. And today it is my pleasure to welcome Laurel Ballou, who's going to do the introductions for our guest speakers today. So Laurel, welcome.
Yes, greetings to everyone. I'm coming to you from the Latin territory. And my name is Laurel Ballou. I am the tribal liaison to the president. And my traditional name is Ses Yahamia, and I also carry my father's name, Sikatspatsu. So I want to recognize the land that I come from and wherever you all are as territories of the Salish Sea, and recognize the abundance and sharing of this land by our ancestors. And I feel it's really important to recognize where these territories come from and why we're here today. And so I want to welcome Kurt Grinnell and his daughter, Lonnie Grinnell Grinninger. I had the pleasure of meeting these both and found out they have worked with my son in tribal politics. Kurt is coming to us from the Jamestown Island tribe, and he has served on the tribal council since 2004. He serves as the tribe's policy representative for natural resources, for the Natural Resource Department. And he brings to the council a unique perspective on natural resource conservation. He represents the natural resource interests of their tribe as vice chair of the Point No Point Council Board and as a commissioner on the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission. For those of you who don't know, the Northwest Indian Fish Commission is a consortium of 20 Western Washington state treaty tribes that deal with treaty rights issues and what those tribes have in common. As Jamestown's representative, Kurt participates in the legal technical team at a policy level, and which his tribe relies on for managing their natural resources. He represents their tribe on tribal fishery issues that require policy involvement, co-management, or tribe-to-tribe discussion. He is also the chairman of the tribe's Natural Resource Committee. And next to him, we have his beautiful daughter, Lonnie Grinnell Grinninger. And she was appointed as the interim tribal vice chair in January 2020. So it's pretty awesome that you have two generations of representation on the tribal council. Lonnie has graduated with her Bachelor's of Science in Psychology from Pacific Lutheran University in 2012, and she has her Master's of Tribal Administration with an emphasis in tribal governance from the Evergreen State College. Go Gooey Ducks. They're my alma mater as well. Her professional experience includes 4 years of working with the Washington State Department of Social and Health Services, and as an Office of Indian Policy Regional Manager, and then as a statewide tribal liaison. Both of her positions led to creating systems and policy that increase access to state services for American Indian and Alaska Natives. In 2017, she was called back to her home tribe to serve as a Deputy Director of Social and Community Services. She continues to partner with the state and local governments in the overall work to benefit Washington tribal nations. And she currently sits on the Governor's Oversight Board for the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. is an alternate delegate to the Washington State USHS Indian Policy Advisory Committee and participates in local work groups to further education and resource between the state and the tribe. But I think it's most important to note that Lori has a certificate in the Klallam language, which she is working to help restore, bringing their Klallam language back to Jamestown. That's very notable. So I want to welcome you both to the forum for Northwest Community College. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm reverting back to where I came from. For Western Washington University, I'm so sorry. And the Huxley Speaker Series. So welcome to you both.
Hattingson. You gonna turn it over to me, Kurt?
Well, you know, it's such a good introduction, Laurel. You know, we put our hands up like this, our Indian people, our Northwest Indian people. When we say thank you and we want to honor somebody, we put our hands up. And I do put my hands up to our elder here from our Lummi tribe. Lonnie and I are both part Lummi. Grandfather Harold James was my mother's father there. That's something that when we introduce ourselves to other Indian people, we talk about our relations, where we're from, how we're related. And also my hands up to the Kinleys too, up in Lummi is another part of our family. And so we have relatives everywhere, and we're very proud of that fact. And so that was such a great introduction. I can't really do any more, but I'm going to hand it over to Lonnie to open us in a good way.
Thank you. When we talk about opening in a good way, we as Indian people want to make sure that we are gathering in the right spirit, coming together in unity, coming together in wisdom and compassion, and doing honor to our ancestors who have done so much work before us. And so when we come in a good way, usually that means we're offering a prayer song, or positive words that open up a meeting space or a teaching space, a forum space in that good way, making sure that we're talking about good things in a good way as well. So I'm going to open us up in prayer. So please pray in your own way and according to your own spirit. Ma sichihai siam. Manu a'i siam. Creator, we lift your name, and Creator, you are so beautiful. Hatningstatia manua a'i squatchy, we thank you for this beautiful day. Hatningstatia manua a'i squaquite, we thank you for the beautiful sun, which gives us light to be able to do the work that we do every day. Hatningstatia manua a'i shitangquank, we thank you for this beautiful earth, Creator, that gives us all this wonderful resource and food and shelter around us so that we can walk on this beautiful earth and do many good things and help us to steward our Shitankwunk, our earth well. Creator, we thank you for the beautiful friends and relatives that are gathered around this virtual table today. And I just thank you for the beautiful minds and hearts that are gathered around here. And I ask, Siam Creator, that you give us open minds and open hearts as we bring these topics of discussion forward today. Let there be education brought forth, and let there be open minds, and let folks walk away from this forum today understanding just a little bit more about Indian country and the things that we do, because we as Indian people want to teach and be able to bring people into the fold and learn about our ways. Masi Chihai Siam, Creator, we raise your name. We thank you so much for everything that you've given us. Masi, amen.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get going, everybody. And again, I want to say a special thanks to Fran at the Northwest Indian Fish Commission for helping us put this together. Thank you, Fran, out there. I know you're with us today here. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you see that?
We can.
Okay. Okay, so just real quickly, you know, when we say our hands are out, you know, for building partnerships, we do a lot of partnering with different agencies, different user groups and landowners tribal communities. We all partner to get the good work done for our habitats. Our natural resources need to move on. And here, just real quickly, you can see Pat Adams, one of our tribal citizens here. Myself, we're practicing something we call the first fish ceremony in a local stream that we have near the tribe. And but I'm going to keep moving pretty fast because we got a lot of slides here. Lonnie, I wanted to hand this over to you.
Absolutely. So when we as Indian people, and this is a value that we have at Statislam Nustayam, the Jamestown S'Klallam, when we're teaching, it's a very sacred process. And so you can see I'm wearing my cedar hat, I'm wearing my wool sash. These are pieces of regalia showing you that what we have to say today, we deem as sacred, and we're passing on sacred knowledge to those who want to hear it. So as we are teaching and in that sacred process, we want to teach from our scars, not our wounds. And that is so that we are actually putting the best forward. We don't want to put hurt forward. This is where you start hearing about terms of intergenerational trauma or historic trauma. You know, we don't want to pass on negativity. We want to pass on what we have learned, the knowledge we have gained, or maybe what we've learned from our wounds, but we don't want to pass on the wounds specifically. So we're here to educate, we're here to teach, we're here to bring people, all the allies of the world, into our fold as Native people. We don't want to pass on guilt. We're here to educate, we're here to we're here to solve some mysteries, maybe do some myth busting, and hope that folks who learn from us today can walk away going, oh, I get it. I know just a little bit more about Native people and Jamestown specifically. And that's to say too, when we talk about anything that has to do with historic trauma, you know, Indian nations have suffered a lot, and so have other nations across the world. And in Jamestown, we don't want to dwell on that. We acknowledge that there has been some negativity in our past. And we do acknowledge that there has been some historic trauma, but we're supposed to grow and we're supposed to heal. And going back, you know, we want to preach from our scars, not our wounds. We want to teach from that. So we don't want to put anybody in guilt. Anything that we teach at Jamestown, we're not trying to bring on what I've heard called white guilt before, or non-Native guilt. That is not our goal at Jamestown. We are here to make sure that we are educating in the best way possible and bringing people into partnership. And one way that we do that is weaving our own story throughout so that it becomes more personal to you as we're giving this information.
Okay, thank you, Lonnie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just a little bit about us. Chichmahan, or like the non-Indian people called him, the Duke of York, he was our tribe's leader from 1808 to 1888. He was actually Lonnie and I's grandfather. He was a visionary leader. He was also the signer of the Point No Point Treaty in 1855. And you can see here, this picture was taken maybe just after the signing of the treaties, and you can see already that he was wearing different clothes. He had different actual weapons there. He had probably a gun holstered. He has a sword, boots, coats. Probably looked like a lot of the guys that he's seen off the boat in 1792 when George Vancouver first arrived onto our shores. Real quickly, the Jamestown tribe had many settlements along the Strait of Juan de Fuca. These are the locations and names of those settlements, or as we fished and hunted along the Strait of Juan de Fuca here. The capital, though, where we were really based out of was Katai. That was in Port Townsend, Washington here. Okay, so I'm gonna, since some of my things kind of covered up here, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about treaties. You know, it's a treaty is a formal agreement between states or nations, and there have been several of them, and we're going to talk more about those. Chichmahan, actually, he went to San Francisco, and he's seen how many people were there. Not unlike other tribal leaders, they traveled a little bit and seen basically what was coming at them into their territories. And so in that when Governor Stevens was negotiating treaties with the tribes, we signed ours on January 26, 1855, called the Point No Point Treaty. And there was 5 treaties signed in 1854 and 55, and they're the Medicine Creek Treaty, the Nia Bay Treaty, the Olympia Treaty, the Treaty of Point Elliott, and again, the Treaty of Point No Point that my tribe, the Port Gamble, the Elwan, and the Skokomish tribe, I believe, are all part of. So the Constitution, Article 6, Section 2 of the United States Constitution, treaties are made and which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. So we talk about these treaties and why we talk about fishing rights and why the tribes have, have the land that they do or have the rights that they do. And they're basically held up by the United States. These were signed into law, although it was a long time ago. They're certainly holding up today and have been through the courts probably multiple times and certainly held up. And every state it has to work with the tribes on those treaties. So in exchange for land, the tribes received certain promises from the U.S., including reservation homelands for their exclusive use and occupancy, and protection of the right to fish, hunt, and gather. Now that's very important to tribes because it's pretty much what they had when the non-Indian people first came here. We were very rich in resources. We had fish, we had shellfish, we had deer, elk, we had everything we needed to eat. And the people of those days, that's all they needed. It's all they asked for. It's all they prayed for. It's all they danced for, sang for, was just something to survive on and keep their families in, with good nutrition and healthy. So we also have the right of taking fish as all usual custom grounds and stations are further secured to said Indians common with the citizens of the territory. So again, it gets back to, when the tribes traded their land and their waters, they did retain the right to fish and hunt and gather. So we talk about, you hear about these fish wars. This was going on when I was a younger man, even before, but, as basically we had our Indian people were trying to exercise their treaty rights. They're trying to fish, trying to hunt, and the state refused to recognize those rights. That led to a lot of arrests by, a lot of tribal citizens were jailed. They were mistreated. They were badly mistreated. And I'm not going to go into all that today, but anyway, we ended up, the tribe said the best recourse is to go to court. And so we chose the legal remedy. So the first major decision for us was the George Bolt decision. Judge Bolt decided in 1974 that tribes have the right to fish in all usual custom places. And so they're called co-managers and of the resource, and they're entitled to 50% of the fish. Now, when I talk to people today, they say, well, that isn't fair. Look how there's so few Indian people, but yet they get half the fish. Well, those treaties were signed in 1855, and it probably didn't really matter back then because there were so few people, but it certainly is less palatable today to some people. But these are what the tribes traded for all of their lands and ceded areas. Let me talk to you about the Northwest Indian Fish Commission. And we talked a little bit about it already, but it's a natural resource support service organization for about 20 of our treaty tribes here in Washington. And it was created right after the Bolt decision in 1974. The board comprises a representative from all of our tribes, including Lummi tribe. And in fact, I just got out of a 2-day meeting with them yesterday. And our our chairman here is Lorraine Loomis. She is a very powerful woman, a very powerful leader that we all get behind and throw all of our support behind, and she leads us. She's got, first time I met Lorraine at a tribal meeting, natural resource meeting, was about 1983. And she was already well involved with fish and wildlife way back then in leadership. She is a Swinomish tribal citizen and a very powerful leader. So I want all you young ladies out there to remember that that we all can lead, and all of us guys can get behind a very powerful lady and move forward with you. And I can tell you the Native tribes here, we're all behind Lorraine, and she's our leader. I can't stress that enough. I hope I tried my best. She's just wonderful, good at what she does. So real quickly, we have a lot of biologists and managers that work for us at the Fish Commission, Fran being just one of them. And they provide technical support services for the tribes and our organizations like Point No Point. They're a central clearinghouse for information and data. They act as a forum to express and communicate and resolve issues. Sometimes we have difficulties or disagreements amongst tribes, and we share those and work those out at these meetings. We always are well represented by fostering, encouraging, and broader understanding of tribal cultures, historical traditions, and continuing rights of tribes' interests in fisheries, wildlife gatherings, activities guaranteed by the treaties. We also forge relationships and pursue activities that maximize the unified strengths of the tribes. Okay, so I'm going to keep moving here. Now, Billy Frank was another powerful leader, and he was our leader for decades at the Fish Commission. He's well known across the country in the federal, state, and governments. He was certainly one of the most well-known leaders in Washington State that we all followed, as we do today with Lorraine. I could spend this whole actual day just talking about Billy Frank. He unfortunately passed here a few years ago, 2014. But everything that he helped set up, everything that he forged, all those days he was arrested down on the river trying to catch a fish, he was the one that brought us to where we are today, and we follow in his footsteps and trying to do the best we can with restoration projects to bring those fish back to perhaps where they were yesteryear. Can't say enough about Billy Frank either. So we have tribes everywhere in every watershed, and you know, it says here, you know, we have seven generation planning, and we think 7 generations ahead. You say, well, how do you do that? And we're kind of illustrating it here today. I'm considered an elder now at the tribe, and I will serve as long as I can. But what we do is we reach back, we pull our young people along with us and educate them. And now you see Lonnie, she's another generation coming ahead and coming with us. And she'll forge ahead after I step aside and no longer can serve. She'll be there. And it'll be her job to bring some of the more young people with her. And that's just how the tribes manage. And when you manage 7 generations ahead, it's a lot of planning. But we want to know, we want is sustainability. We want to make sure that we have the best sciences, best practices in anything we do, whether it's our hatcheries or any kind of fish growing operations, you know, aquaculture projects, you know, growing clams or oysters. We want to make sure we do it in a sustainable, and we do it the right way. You know, we are really an asset to our regions. You know, we are out there protecting and fighting for our Mother Earth. So it's not just our 7 generations that we're leaving this habitat and our natural resources too. It's all peoples, all citizens of this country. We all need to work very hard to leave our children's children a planet that they can prosper in and enjoy, and that we have all of our animals and fish and everything intact, all our habitat intact, It's very, very difficult, but we are working on that. Okay, so a little bit more about Indian tribes. We are sovereign nations. And sovereign is a political. It's a political, not so much, you know, your Indian people, but we're a sovereign nation basically inside the United States. And so we do have we do meet with other leaders in the federal government, and from the president on down, all the way down into state, county, and city officials. We are very resourceful. Tribes have come a long ways. We hire really good people now to do good work in the right way. We link our lands and our natural resources and consider them secret. We fight to our very, you know, to the very end, and for our natural resources. We are linked to our children, and we fully believe in their future. As we brought Lonnie up in a way that she is going to help us help lead us even today. And we are unique in our culture, like everybody has. They come from somewhere, somehow they end up here, or they're wherever they are, but they have a culture, and just like any other group. So I am going to hand this off to Lonnie. She's going to take over at this point.
Sounds good. Okay, quick disclaimer. Going through these slides, I'm going to attempt to talk about cultural nuance and a little bit of history all in the next few minutes. So hundreds of years worth of history here in the next couple of minutes. It might feel a little bit like a roller coaster, but stick with me. I promise we'll get through it. All right, so next slide, please. Just as my dad mentioned before, this is one of the things that I want folks to walk away with anytime that I'm doing any education about Indian tribes. It's a political distinction, not a racial distinction. And political distinction means that it doesn't have anything to do with race. Okay, so yes, we are a race of people, American Indian, Alaska Native, but we have that sovereignty, that political distinction that was actually it wasn't granted, so we already have it, right? But it was acknowledged in United States federal documents. When the United States came to be, they wrote their Constitution, and we're in there. You know, as an example, Section 8, subsection 3, Congress shall have power to regulate commerce with foreign nations, the states, and with Indian tribes. So we were actually set apart from the United States itself. Indian nations were not considered an actual part of the United States. We were like separate nations, just like France, Spain, separate, but still on the North American continent. Okay, so political distinction, not racial. That's what sets us apart from other races from here in the United States. Go ahead to the next slide, please. Now take a look at this visual. I will say, quick disclaimer, this is my opinion of the visual history for Indian nations. And you can see it started off really well, and over time it decreased, was maybe a little negative, and then it would go back up for a time, and then it went really down low into some negative points of history. And now you can see we are on an upward trajectory. But take a look at the beginning of that chart. Time immemorial, since the beginning. This is when Indian nations were able to govern themselves without the imposition of other governments, okay? And we know, just looking at history, you know, and we live in America, we know how this works. There are governments trying to impose upon each other all the time. We've seen it in history. One nation tries to take over another, it ends up in war. So we've seen this, we know that it happens. But there was a time when Indian nations were sharing most of the North American continent without the imposition of other countries, you know, folks that were visiting maybe or trading from other countries coming across the Atlantic Ocean. We actually had a time when we were just governing ourselves. And you go into the next era, you know, getting into the about 1600s, manifest destiny. This is where we were literally seeing countries coming to the North American continent and planting their flag. These were things that actually happened. You know, you think about the Disney movie Pocahontas, it's not really all that far off as far as reality. There were countries coming over and claiming land in the name of their monarchy. It happened. And soon enough, these monarchies, you know, were sending their people over. They would run into the Indian tribes. And this is where the treaties start coming to play. Okay, so now you're getting into the 1700s. The monarchies, the settlers realize that they need law-binding agreements between these Indian people. We need agreements, maybe we need to trade for weapons. Maybe we need to trade for loyalty and allyship. Maybe we need to trade land for other resource goods. The Indians had a lot of good things. They knew the land, they knew the resources, but then the non-natives had their resources too that we were interested in. So treaties were coming. And because Indian nations were considered sovereign, that's where you get the treaty, one nation agreeing with another nation. And that's why it is so law binding. And that is why it is still considered the supreme law of the land. Now, I will say what's interesting, as soon as the United States became its own sovereign nation, okay, even if Britain didn't want to consider it as sovereign, right? Sovereign nations still have their sovereignty, even if they're not being recognized as such. Any treaty that involved involved Britain and a tribe became null and void as soon as the United States came to be, because those settlements were no longer British, they were American. So there are ways that treaties have been broken just by legal agreements, but we still have a lot of treaties that are in play today. And the Treaty of Point No Point, which my dad has touched on, that's still one that we hold up to this day, okay? So after the treaty area, you start getting into the removal area. And very quickly, this is where you get to the point of where tribes were forced off of their lands. And many, many, many children were unfortunately taken under the guise of tribes just didn't know how to care for children properly or protect them properly or feed them, clothe them properly. And so many were taken into state custody and then placed in boarding schools. And maybe some of you have heard of this before. And in the boarding schools, unfortunately, the children were told that they couldn't practice their culture, could not speak their language. Many unfortunate and negative things happened in those boarding schools. And in fact, today we do have elders that are still alive that come from a really negative past like that. So this is still recent history, even though it started in the 1800s, okay? So still very recent, and still that's a lot of reason why there are some native tribes and individuals that have a hard time trusting government. And you can see why, but many of us are choosing to heal and move forward from this, okay? So the removal era was very hard on Indian people. We're losing our sacred ties to our land. We're losing our sacred ties to our children. And frankly, there were some tribes that were completely decimated. There were some tribes that were losing everything and becoming extinct in a way, okay? So very hard on Indian people. And this is why I call it the lowest point of Indian history, okay? But we don't have to stay there. Now we're gonna move forward. We're gonna move up in a positive way. So now you come into the 1900s, and that's where recognition comes in. This is where tribes are recognized once again for the sovereignty that they held the entire time. Now the federal government of the United States is choosing to recognize them, which is good. Tribes are being recognized now, and now we're in this self-governance era. That's where we are today. So now that we're recognized, this means that the federal government is contracting with us as tribes to be able to use this funding to govern our people in our own way. We can use this money to build health clinics, dental clinics. We can use this money to give scholarships to our people who want to go get a higher education or go get a certificate in a career field. We can use all of this wonderful money to build ourselves up again. And yes, it is building ourselves up in the modern and American world, but we're doing it not at the expense of our culture, but in partnership with our culture and our values. So now I, as an American and Indian woman, I go out and I get my college education. I learn the ways of Western knowledge and all of the positivity that it has, and maybe some negative things too. But I take all of those wonderful values that I do want, and I bring them back to my tribe, and I partner it with my indigenous knowledge perspective. That is how I serve my people now. And that is actually what we're doing now. We are a modern tribe. We have ancient traditions, we have ancient roots, but we are bringing what we can from the Western knowledge perspective into our tribe. And that helps us self-govern even more successfully, because we have to live in this world now. We have to be with non-natives, and that's okay. It's good to partner with non-natives, because when we partner together, we're actually stronger, and we serve the Indian people and all of Indian country in a more successful and stronger way. Okay, next slide. Go ahead and skip, because I think I touched on a lot of this. Yep, you can go ahead and move ahead on that one as well, touched on that. So I do want to talk about this part real quick. So the results of the self-governance era has led tribes to a lot of success. We can basically, at this point, if there is a business opportunity, a tribe is in it. Construction, fashion, you know, aquaculture, casinos. I mean, these are things that are probably common, but you know, here's one that I like to bring up too. The Umpqua tribe, amazing ice cream. What a wonderful economic development. Ice cream. You know, so if there is an opportunity for tribes to be able to build themselves up, create economic diversity within themselves, there's probably an Indian tribe trying it out. You know, there are tribes doing construction companies, consulting companies, internet provider companies. You know, tribes now are opening their health clinics and dental clinics to the greater community. So they're not just serving their own tribes. Now we open it up. You know, so this is what self-governance and recognition of tribes has allowed us to do. This is what we can do. And now, speaking as somebody who comes from a department at a tribe that is not income generating, with all of the income that aquaculture and casinos can bring in now, and all of those other income generating businesses, some of that money comes to me. And then I get to use that money for social services. I get to use this money to teach people our language. I get to buy our language dictionaries and our grammar books and pass them out freely so that our language lives. You know, so this all works together, and all a wonderful piece of the success of the self-governance era. And I have to say, I love this picture on the bottom. It's, you know, it's my dear old dad, and he's got a bag of oysters on his shoulder. And he is an Indian entrepreneur. He's a minority entrepreneur. So this is another piece of self-governance that has led us to more success. You know, Indian people don't have to be attached to the tribe all the time. They can go out and be their own business owner. It's amazing. So these are the types of things that we get to relish in and push forward today. Next slide, please. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I just want you to look at the dates specifically. We're talking about civil rights, voting rights, citizenship. That's all starting in the 1920s. So one of the points that I want you to walk away with today is Indian history is pretty darn recent. I mean, we only became American citizens in the 20s, okay? Getting our civil rights in the 60s and our Indian Child Welfare Act in the 70s, the right to vote, okay? So we have worked very hard as all Indian country across the United States to gain these rights back and to have them recognized so that we can practice them. Next slide. So the wonderful thing about being a sovereign Indian nation is we get to involve ourselves at all the levels of government, from the president to all the branches of military, to all the federal agencies and their programs, down to the state governments. So we see the governors and all of his or her cabinet all the time. We work very closely with state agencies, down to the county government, the city government. And in fact, we also meet with other tribes. They are sovereign governments, right? So especially in treaty rights, we will come together government to government and we'll talk about things. We'll hash it out. Now, the one thing that's really interesting is, do you think any of us agree 100% of the time at any of these levels? No, right? So there are times when tribes, maybe we're fighting with each other on one particular issue, but then we'll go arm in arm to the feds, and maybe we will, you know, lovingly fight with the feds on a particular issue, but we're making sure that we are working together and in Indian country to fight for what we need and our rights to keep those things going in Indian country. But we work with all levels. We are involved in every level that we can, making sure that we are keeping in close contact, partnership, and allyship with all of the governments that we need. Next, please.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt here just because I know we're time sensitive and we're not, I don't think we're going to make it through our whole show here, Lonnie.
That's okay.
I'm just going to ask Stefan to step in here if there's questions or if he wants us to keep going,
Sure. I'd say, let's, if you can, run a couple more minutes and wrap it up. So we have a few minutes for questions. That'd be a little bit of both. Yes, please.
Okay, couple more minutes.
Couple more minutes, Lon.
All right. So very quickly, just look at the numbers here. We have 29 federally recognized tribes in Washington state. That does not mean that covers all tribes that used to be here, but these are the 29 that have actually gained that re-recognition. They've gone through the process with the federal government to be re-recognized as sovereign nations again. We do have 4 state recognized tribes that you can see there. They do not have the same, I would say, it's not the same level of recognition as if the tribe would be federally recognized. The federally recognized tribes gain contracts. The state recognized tribes do not. They are treated more like organizations, unfortunately, rather than sovereign nations. Next slide, please. I have covered this one already, so we can go ahead and move on. Ooh, cultural nuances. There is a lot to cover here that we don't have time for, but if you're ever, I'll just give a couple of top 3, let's say, in cultural nuances. First is that elders are very sacred. So whenever an elder is speaking, it is my job as a young person to sit and listen. Okay? I should not be interrupting because the sacred process of passing on knowledge is happening in this moment. For me to interrupt that process means that I am disrespecting the sacred process. Now, you might have found that Native people are very verbose, tend to talk a long time. So sometimes when you're sitting with that elder, the sacred process of gaining wisdom might take 4 hours. It might take 4 minutes. You never know. It depends on what the elder wants to be able to pass on to you. But that's why it's so important to make time for our elders and for us to avoid interrupting so that we don't disrupt that sacred process, okay? So elders are sacred. I think another top one you should know is that shaking hands with a Native American might feel a little different than when you're going in for a normal, firm American handshake. It's not the same. The handshakes with Native Americans are normally a bit softer, sometimes even fingertip to fingertip. And a lot of this usually has to do with elders. You don't want to hurt their hands, so you don't squeeze hard, okay? So you're just coming in gently. But if you ever go to shake a Native American's hand and that's what happens, that's okay. If you went in thinking it was going to be a nice firm handshake, just, you can back off a little bit. Just make it nice and soft. That's usually what happens when you're in a Native community. Next, please. Ooh, there's a lot on here that I don't think we'll be able to cover today. But I do want to address this question. Why do Native Americans receive free health care? This is a piece of treaties that we didn't acknowledge earlier because we're focusing mostly on natural resources, but treaties also included health care at the time, okay? So that is a part of our treaty rights, and that is why you see a lot of our contracts going to our mental health clinics, substance use disorder clinics, dental clinics, and medical clinics. And this is one of the reasons why the federal agency, Indian Health Services, was created. Okay, next, please. Let's see, do tribes still have chiefs? Depends on the tribe and their form of government. Our tribe does not technically have a chief anymore. Our last hereditary chief was David Prince, who happens to be, so the gentleman that you see with the 2 ladies in this photograph, it was his grandfather was the last hereditary chief of the Jamestown S'Klallam. So technically speaking, if we used our chieftain, I would say values, he would be our next hereditary chief today. Many chiefs, hereditary chiefs, they hold more of a, not a political influence, they hold more of a cultural influence and a cultural authority, but they don't tend to speak to the political pieces. That's left more to the tribal council, those chairmen, vice chairwomen, so on and so forth. But there are some tribes that do still hold to that traditional value, and they do have chiefs. But here in Washington state, you don't normally hear about that. Of course, the Lummi Nation did have their chief, and he recently passed, unfortunately. That was Bill James, my grandmother's cousin. So the Lummi tribe is a good example of one that does hold that hereditary chief position in a very sacred way. But most of your tribal governments typically mirror the United States government today. You know, that president, vice president types of positions, secretary, treasurer. But there are some tribes that have decided to go back to their old way of structure in their government, and they have those elder councils, or they have particular elder councils that deal with discipline rather than sending their folks to jail. They do a traditional discipline council. There's a lot to digest there, but just to give you a little bit of brief comparison. Next, please. We did address this a little bit earlier. Not all tribes get along, and that's okay. That's the way it is. Not all nations have to get along, but we do make sure that in Indian country, we are fighting as united as possible, especially when it comes to bigger issues, like making sure we keep our civil rights, our religious rights, keeping our education going, and keeping our sovereignty going as well. And then this last question here, why do some Native Americans look light skinned? And you can see right here in this picture, you got my grandmothers, and then my father, and then myself. And you can see we do look progressively lighter and lighter skinned. A lot of that comes to genetics, right? You know, my grandmother married a non-Native man, my father married a non-Native woman, and genetics leads to lighter skin, but that does not make us less Native, okay? It is the tribe who considers citizenship. They are the ones that write the constitutions, and they say who can be a part of that tribe, okay? So tribes determine their citizenship, and it is citizenship, not membership. There are some tribes that choose to use the word membership, but we at Jamestown, we like using citizenship because that ties us to that idea of sovereign nation. Like, I'm a United States citizen, I'm a Washington State citizen, and I am a Jamestown S'Klallam citizen, okay? So, but when we talk about light-skinned versus dark-skinned natives, we don't want to get into that. That citizenship is not based on your skin color, okay? So even if somebody looks even fairer skinned than me, my sister is actually a good example. I happen to have the darker hair of the family. She has lighter, blonder hair. She is equally just as Native as I am. She can practice her culture. She doesn't have to have the skin for it. She has the heart. She has the blood for it, okay? So tribes are the ones that pass on their citizenship. They are the ones that pass on their culture. Okay? And I think that might be it almost here. Yeah. So I think we'll pause there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, a lot to digest in there. A couple of questions came in. One was concerning the dam removals, and obviously that has a huge impact on fish, but there was also a question on the electricity replacement. And does that play into, does the council have a role in replacing that electricity or sourcing it?
Those are good questions, and you may be referring to the Snake River dams or the Elwha Dam removal.
I believe it was the Elwha was the question,
Elwha,
yeah.
the local. Yes, here locally we have an opportunity to get our power elsewhere. So it wasn't a need. That was basically, that power was it was a secondary power source. It mostly powered the mill that put it in. And so we are still okay on power here. You know, if you move to the 4 dams, I believe it is in the Snake River, they're going to have to find other resources for that power, and that could be, you know, I'm not an expert on this, you know, whether it's more solar and wind power or a nuclear type of power source. I think that's still up for debate on how they're going to do that.
Yeah. There's also a question in terms of, you mentioned a lot of the partnerships that the tribe maintains with other tribes, with all that range of government. How about trans-border? Are you all involved with Canadian government and with Canadian Indigenous groups?
That's a great question. Gosh, for Jamestown. So actually here's a great example, Canoe Journey. If folks are not quite familiar with Canoe Journey, it is our annual celebration where we take our canoes and we will actually paddle from tribe to tribe, and we celebrate by doing our songs, our dances, sharing food, sharing gifts, until finally we are at a host destination at the end and we celebrate for a whole week. you know, and unfortunately with COVID, we haven't had our canoe journey in 2020, and we won't again this year for 2021. But Lummi Nation hosted in 2019, and it was amazing. Hands up to our Lummi family members up there. And we actually had Hawaiians join in. So we will have folks from Canadian tribes, the Cowichan, they come and participate. So I would say that our partnerships definitely happen on the cultural level, transborder. We've had Pacific Islanders come and participate before, and their ceremonies are so beautiful, and they share them with us during our tribal journeys. It was completely amazing. But as far as partnerships, tribes are definitely, I would say, okay, so aside from culture, tribes are definitely involved in the United Nations. In fact, we have, oh gosh, now there's a declaration from the United Nations that recognizes tribes and our ability to be able to do our work as sovereign nations. And I'm neglecting to remember the name of the document, but we do get into international issues as well, especially when we're wanting to help our brother and sister nations that have not quite reached that level of recognition of sovereignty yet. We also, as tribes, because we are sovereign, we are allowed to make agreements and partnerships with whomever we want within and outside of the United States. So tribes, in fact, can reach to international markets. Here's an example, Jamestown, we sell our seafood to China. They love gooey duck. They love our shellfish. In fact, we were even reaching, I wanna say, Dad, we were reaching into parts of France, restaurants in France with our shellfish.
Sure.
So we are able to, tribes are able to do that, although I cannot name some specific places that in general tribes are reaching into, but canoe journey is what I know about most at this moment to be able to answer that question.
So here's a hot topic for you. Thoughts on farmed salmon as a form of aquaculture. Does the tribe have a stance there, or do you personally have opinions?
Oh yeah,
We do.
actually, yeah, we do. We are actually farming salmon, and as are other tribes in Washington, the Colville tribes too. You know, the Jamestown tribe has, you know, we're in partnership with the University of Washington and NOAA at the Manchester site, and we're raising sablefish, black cod, in a pilot program, and we hope to take that to a commercial level. We also are looking for a opportunity to raise sterile steelhead, native species. And this is one of the certainly there's people on both sides of the argument. We believe that we can raise fish as we do our shellfish. We think we can do it sustainably, and if we use best practices and best sciences and be transparent, that we can do this in a way that we can take it forward into the next several generations. You know, to try to subsist on wild stock fish today is very, very difficult, even just to get fish for our elders, let alone try to do it, conduct it in a commercial, viable way.
Thank you. And before we're running out of time, but there was a question that I'm curious. If you could rename one single geographic feature within Washington State, what might that be, and what name would you change it to?
Gosh.
It's a good question.
Yeah. You know, I'll throw this one out there. I would, because it is our state capital, I would love to see the name of Olympia changed to the name of which that people, and that would be Squaxin Island. I believe that's their territory. If there was a name of that area from Squaxin, I think that would be really neat, actually.
Or to rename Port Townsend Katai.
That too, if you come back to our territory, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, to be, you know, other people that have been here a long time have pride in those names too, and we don't want to hurt any feelings with that. But the old names were fine too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll look for ways of incorporating both. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. And Laurel, thank you for the introduction. And yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
All right.
Hutchinson.
Good day to you.
Bye.